I am, back again. Prokofiev 6th Sonata, first movement, at the recap. I'm just back from a 5-day break, I guess. This is one of the things we have to deal with in trying to practice efficiently and consistently, is that if your practice schedule can't be consistent, you can try to plan, or you can try to hope for the best. In terms of planning, ideally, I would have so reinforced what I had learned that the break wouldn't matter. Namely, all of my short-term learning would turn into long-term learning and would be stuck in there really well. I don't think it's there, but I've left lots of breadcrumb trails. In other words, I've written down fingerings, I've made decisions, I've articulated out loud, which is different from my previous practicing when I used to practice silently, or at least without talking to myself. Now, of course, with you along for the ride, I'm talking to myself constantly, or at least to that red light in front of me. In any event, I'm going to see with you what it's like. I'm both physically stone cold and mentally, I don't know where I am. I am 5 days older, had a good break, and now I'm going to revisit some of the material. Since I'm at the very shortened recap of this movement, I'm expecting a fair amount of recurrence and then some change, and then we'll see how the coda works out. But in any event, in this edition, the recap starts at measure 218, 19, 20, 21. Had I thought about it, I would have numbered these things earlier, 22, 23, 24, 25. I don't want you to have to watch me numbering too many things, but just for reference, 26, 27, 228. Okay, so we start. An appropriate comparison is always good. This is really interesting because we're back in A major. Okay, so here's the interesting thing. The right hand is an octave lower. The phrase is exactly the same otherwise, with the same recurrences. And interestingly, the phrase ends in exactly the same register. At the beginning, it finishes there. Here, there's no leap. Okay. Meanwhile, the left hand just, I don't know, for interest sake. We can never know for sure without talking to the composer exactly what his motivation is, but the beginning in the left hand had the A to reinforce the A quality, A major equality of the piece. Then it meanders off, but still the A recurs. Here, by comparison, we get D sharp first, so that there's more of a sense of continuity, less of a sense of arrival or beginning. There's no need to reaffirm the A, I guess, because we've already had it. So it makes the initial arrival rather strident. And this is after a pause over the bar line that preceded. And of course, few pianists don't get pleasure from playing the bottom A on the piano. Much more so even than the top C, because there's such resonance. And on a good concert D, for example, that area of the Steinway is so rich. But in any event, he delays the A, he delays the tonality till the second half of the second measure. We get a little A minor, which turns into A major there. So that's a lot of fun. So I'm going to compare, instead of we get everything's backwards, except there was D, A, then D sharp twice. Here there's D sharp. A is beat 1 and beat 4, whereas before it was beat 2 and beat 4. Here it's beat 1 and beat 4 with the A, 1, 2, 3. Here's one of those ways in which, I don't want to say composers drive me crazy, but their inconsistencies cause me to have to interpret. He writes the D sharp, the opening beat, as a eighth note with a rest. Then the A is a half note, and a quarter note for the fourth beat on D sharp. So it's impossible to play the A for its full value, but he's going out of his way to say, play the first note as an eighth note so you can move around. At the beginning, he goes quarter, then quarter with the pedally sign, bleeding through the third beat rest, and then quarter again. But here he has eighth with a rest, then long note, and quarter note. That's interesting, you know. So the other thing is the second beat has an accent, and that's not true at the beginning. So I think displacing the A, displacing the tonic, maybe means I need both an ergogic and a dynamic presence on that second beat. So it's going to be long. It still has to be shortened because I can't possibly get to the D sharp, and I don't think I'm going to over pedal there. I think I'm going to want the non-legato. So we have, pardon me. Okay, so now I have to find out. Okay, same exact voicing at the end. I'm doing both hands. Okay, now I'm going to play side-by-side comparisons. All eighth notes. This figure ends with a quarter note. So far identical. Left hand. I rather suspect it'll be the same. Identical. How nice. Just for reinforcement. Yeah, I was looking for it. Coordination issue, or said another way, I'm trying to make it physically familiar to me. The first one is easy. It's all eighth notes. But to come down on the end of 3, which is where the quarter note is here, I actually want to make a downward gesture so my body remembers it. So we have, without the accent. Warning, don't drill what you can't play, but do drill what you can play until it becomes mentally, physically, orally familiar, visually as well. So the shift here, my consciousness says, please go to the fourth finger on C. That's an unexpected place and an unexpected solution, so that's where I need the mental input. Suspect, but don't know. Okay, the arpeggio looks like the original, not like the second version that started on G. It's a F sharp minor, G, F sharp minor, and the 7th. Let's see about the left hand. Okay, I'm going to just rewrite the fingering because I know it'll save me time, rather than relying on refreshing my memory for the first time. I just want to know. So it's diminished. Okay, 225, when that phrase finishes, it finishes by going back down to the low A octave. So the original one goes just to the medium low octave, and then it goes from A to D sharp. Here, interestingly enough, to add a finality, a breath, power to it, so I'm going to tell myself slowly. G major, F sharp minor. Okay. Even more reason, because it's so much lower, to shift my attention to the left hand at the bottom. To decide. If I want real visual input, I have to concentrate on placing the left hand. It has plenty of time, then shifting my attention to, unless I fully trust this arpeggio. So, G major, F sharp, diminish. That's the idea. Fourth finger, fifth finger. I ended up staring at the left hand that time. It still worked. No, I haven't worked that out yet. That's my ideal. I think that's what makes me feel the most secure is view the A, let the hand find it, and then come up to the A in the right hand. That time I had enough time to just trust the feel of the left hand and didn't look at it at all. Okay, that's probably good. I like it. That's interesting. Single A at the bottom. Let me see if that's what it did at the beginning. Second statement. Okay. Second statement. We know about the lower A. So no longer low A. Whoop. Oh yeah. That's what it did at the beginning. And this time it goes, which is, so I'm going to write CF 221. In other words, I want to refer to 221. It's not identical to the end of the first statement of the recap. Close enough. The only difference is that instead of an octave, D sharp, B flat, it's a single note B flat. So if I have to find a motivation, that lightens up the texture somewhat. Even though this statement, the second statement, is written fortissimo, let me see about that. Okay, at the beginning, the first statement was fortissimo, and the second statement is fortissimo after a forte arpeggio. In the recap here, and I've got to indicate that, assuming he means it, it starts off lighter on the D sharp, maybe because we want it to sneak in rather than being too bold, and then it reinforces. It gets. Oh, that's another interesting thing. The lower octave is raised back to its original place the second time around. So that's another way in which forte rather than fortissimo makes sense, because it's a low register to start with, and then it brightens up on the second statement. And then it finishes with actually fewer tonal resources, because it's not having that rhythmic, but rather with a single bass note. It's more of a reinforcement of the first statement, done a little bit differently. Okay, at this point, we have all these imitative tosses originally, and here we have nothing of the sort. Here we have different material. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow. I expected maybe a D or something. That was the original. So, this is an augmentation of that verb. Let's see. So this is half note, quarter, quarter, and the recap version is whole note, 2, 3, 4. Then what should have been D turned into this interesting cluster B, E, F. So that's totally unexpected, as is the augmentation. The key signature has also been erased in essence. It's the three naturals instead of 3 sharps, so it's looks like A minor. Now, it sounds a lot like C major, but it's on A. So this figure occurs twice in these two thematic statements. Okay. So both of the melodic fragments in augmentation go to slightly different targets, but they have the same melodic idea. They're on the same, melodically on the same notes as well. Left hand was full of that A mode of imitation, dancing all over the place. But I'm wondering if this arpeggio is in any way related to. Well, it goes up. Not still A-centered. To see how the seconds make the chord notes cluster. In other words, have A and what amounts to a supertonic, perhaps, subdominant to the dominant, a lowered leading tone to the tonic. So these belong together, these belong together. That's how I tend to hear it. So it's back on A. So, of course, what will aid me is a fingering that shows some of that relation. 5-4-2-1 is an obvious choice for a chord that's spaced with the third finger or the middle note missing, seconds on odd missing. That works out pretty well because then I can go over to 3. So I want to get, all that I need to decide is, perfect, I'll just stick with this hand group, the 3-2-1 hand group, span the 5th max. So, both reinforces my recognition of how the notes are close or distant from one another, and having a good feel for the grouping makes it playable. That's always what I love in a fingering. If it serves the melodic identity of the passage as well as my own comfort, then it's ideal. So let's see now. Okay, this is not going to be quite as convenient. We'll see. Okay, so if I'm thinking big-handed, which is to say fewer hand groups but more passive hand groups rather than more turns, then I would go to 5/4 on F B flat, so I can go 4-3-2-1, finish off one hand group, and actually hold the half note F the way he's indicated. Anything else, like 3-2-1, 3-2-1-1 would work, not as smoothly or as easily. So again, for my hand, because 5/4 is not uncomfortable there, and because I want to hold the half note if I can, that works. 5-4-2-1, 5-4, 4-3-2-1, 3-2-1. And then, okay, if I stick with comfort on B flat in the second octave worth, 5-3-2-1 would be comfortable. Then I can move to 3-1 in the next octave. Or I can still go 5-4-3. I can go 5-4-3-2-1. Whoops. Well, there's something attractive about that for me, because it bridges this fifth without my having to shift my whole hand over. So I'm going to maybe, no, I know, I'm going to write it in the way I just described it. 4-5, going to 3, 5-4, 1, and then 2-1 at the end. So I have, as you can see, it plays itself. So a lot more of my practice time in learning a new piece is spent thinking about it, and a lot less just playing through it, because I do not want to develop an awkward, uncomfortable relationship with the music. So I want to feel as much as possible that it's getting integrated, and that feels good. Now, of course, I haven't added the right hand. Luckily, the right hand is moving very slowly, so... And the other thing I will do is tell myself I don't go to G until midway in the third measure, so it's A, A. Oh, luckily, my fingering didn't intrude too much. What I had neglected to do, I don't advise you to do this at home, I had neglected to find out if there were interference between the hands. And although there is interference of a sort, I'm going to have to negotiate getting around one another. My fingering happens to work just about perfectly, so go figure. Now, there's a strange feeling. It's not that I know it now, but that is the choices I made for the fingering and for a sense of continuity and fluency make me know that I'll be able to learn this quickly. In other words, if I really strained at it, I needed to cheat. In other words, it's sort of memorized. It's not perfect, and plenty of people can do that better, but it feels good to know that there is a simplicity in my attitude right now, and in my execution. This is how it finishes. I expect a D, I don't get a D, neither do you. In fact, he's going out of his way. I think there's humor in this decision. The original goes da 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 D. With a B attached, F-A for good measure. There's no sign of a D anywhere. I mean, because I'm amused by this, I'm gonna count. There's an A and a B and an E flat and an E and an F and a G and a D flat as well down there. Anything else? Got the A. An E natural, didn't have that before. Okay, so it's missing. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of the 12 notes. And the one most obvious note that's missing is the D. If you can imagine, it's there, hidden. It's not actually played, it's just imagined. Okay, so this reminds me a little bit of this. I'm too high, sorry. Because things tend to shift. Here we have what amounts to an A minor 7, for example. This is, that can come in handy. I'm going to write E flat 7th, and then A minor 7th. Because that's one note extra. Let's see. G flat half diminished 7th, 9th, something like that. So we have the other thing I will define for myself is the last 5 notes are white notes, so that's. Am I going to use that finger? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get to the G flat. Now here's an example of something where the length of the bass note again is not relevant to how you finger it or hold onto it. There's no way you can play the whole note. Well, unless you have a truly monster hand, you're not going to. Well, you'd have to get up here. So that's. I've never met anyone with quite as big a hand as that. So you're going to have to let go. It might be a sosnudo, but to do it purely, you have to put it down after the E flat that's also part of the beginning, so that the pedal wouldn't hold the rest of the arpeggio. You have that texture. That would be okay. And if you did that, let's see about the interference. Now the hands don't interfere with one another. Okay. Decorated. And it's not a straight arpeggio, it turns back up just before the end. Chromatic. G sharp diminished. Extra voice in the bass, that will help to determine, it'll force my fingering to be certain ways rather than other ways. So, generally I look for pairings. In other words, can two or more chords be under one basic hand position? So I could start fingering from where I get the double intervals. But I found, my body found for me. Whoops. I found that the single notes lead inevitably and comfortably to the first interval. So I'm going to put 5-3 there because that's G7, the fingering 1, 2, 3, and 5 together. So, and then the third going to the sixth, to the sixth, and the third going to another sixth. And then the last interval, or meted fifth, goes down to there. So because even though I would ideally like to be able to just have the last few just sink into one another, that may not be possible. For example, going to this 6 here, D sharp, excuse me, G sharp, no, C sharp, A sharp, I'm committed to moving in on the black notes. It leaves me in a very inconvenient place to get to A. For example, if I wanted to get to 1-4 or 1-3, which might make it possible, it's a very awkward thing to get to. 1-5 is ideal, so I'm just going to stick with it. So 2-4 going to 1-5, and I'm going to bracket those notes to show their sense of belonging. And probably 1-4 on the last chord gets me to 5 on the down. So. Another pairing, G sharp to E, going to F to D. I'm going to use 1-3 instead of 1-4. 1-4 would get me to 2-5, but 1-3 is ever so slightly more comfortable for me, considering I'm going to go to 2 white notes. So I'm going to go from 1-3 to 1-5. I think, yeah, that seems good. Now I still have to think those groups as individual thoughts. Chord, and these, and these, and these, and this. I'm not yet satisfied. What I have been doing is going 2-4 on E, G sharp, and then 1-5 on B and G, but that requires my letting go completely of the upper third because it doesn't really lend itself to getting to the next chord that comfortably. Most comfortable for my hand would be 1 and 2, sliding down here to 1 and 5. That's really nice. Let's see if I can. The disadvantage to that is in finding visually oriented. In other words, if I need the vision to help me out, well, how will I know if I don't test out my vision? Which means in turn that I have to play it more or less from memory. upward. It makes the getting to the G, B harder. What if I split the difference and go 3-2? So. And practicing the transition from the individual notes makes me know if, see, that's really starting to work. So I'm going to put in that 2-3. Live with it for a while. I'm wondering if the same principle applies here. No, not quite. No, that feels different. Going downward and going upward are two completely different experiences. So two different fingerings make sense. It's a good discrimination. So, 2-3. Let me see how that works. Oh, how did I get off? E flat, C sharp minor. This groups itself, in other words, in chords. Whether the chords are handy for my hand position, don't know. B flat first inversion is B chromatic size, then C sharp minor, then A. I could go. If I want a smaller, well, if I don't want to turn on B, I could go to 5 and then turn. But I think the more orthodox turn fingering works better. So 2, 1. Okay, let's see. Of course, the intervals are not the same. That would be too lucky. Okay, now it's this kind of multitasking. The hands are doing different intervals. I do recall some of the hardest stuff is to play scales in octaves in contrary motion, for example, or worse yet, contrary motion arpeggios, because the intervals are so dramatically different that you're constantly needing to be aware of the individual choreographies of the hands and where you shift your attention to make sure you're on top of the most challenging aspects of it. So this is something like that, in that it's contrary, but not mirrored, not consistent. So. What I do is I find the groupings that don't require a lot of thought. For example, two note groups in the left hand and the hand position groups, the chords. So that means I could play, for example, if my right hand is playing a B flat outline, starting on D, and the turn. So I trust more in the sensation of the left, I trust more in the simplicity of the right hand, I guess. So I can think my way to the left hand, and right now I'm actually looking at the score, the left hand part alone. For reinforcement, and I'm remembering what the right hand feels like. Again, I'm going to C sharp minor. Okay, so that gives a good sense of not only reinforcement, but helps me to practice how to concentrate on what to concentrate on, how to practice. This is easy, partly because it's single notes, and then, okay, so it looks like those 4 note groups of the right hand are going to match the sets of 2 note groups in the left hand. So we have efficient. In other words, it's positively reinforcing. But I need, if I'm going to do that, I need to trust in the sensation, the gesture that gets me to be in the right. Because for now I'm afraid to look at it. Feeling that I have a good solution in hand that I will come back to. So now we have to compare this augmented melody with what came before, the chromatic second theme of the second phrase of the second. Okay, it's all chromatic, so let's see what this is. 1, 2, 3, 4. E flat. Again, the D is missing, but at least there's a D this time. In other words, there's some vestige of the original theme that was not augmented. So. Now, meanwhile. The fingering that worked so well before. Okay, and that's what's different. I've already marked what's different. The fingering sort of lends itself. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then perhaps 3, 1 at the top. Reinforcing fingering indication. Sorry. 5, 4. Good. I'm going to have a different arpeggio. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I have a bit of a problem here. I'm below my right hand. I have 2 more notes to go. So I'm going to have to do one of 2 things. Well, 3 things. Put up with it and just negotiate the weirdness. Just do it. Or regroup and refinger. Or change the hand distribution. For now I'm going to stick with it, avoiding the hand redistribution, but not necessarily for long. Well, that didn't take long. I stuck with it for all of a few seconds. My last 2 notes I'm going to take in the right hand. The advantage being, if I remember, then I've got to put 4th finger on the E flat octave in the right hand, so I'm going 1, 5, 1, 4. Very easy. How about that? All right. Feel good. New arpeggios. Okay, the first 2 arpeggios all started on A, so does this one. But it's a different arpeggio. So, you know what, I don't care how he's written the enharmonic equivalents, whether they're theoretically pure or not. I save myself a lot of time by writing the simplest enharmonic equivalent. So this is like D flat or a C sharp diminished seventh. Next chords are like a D seventh chord. D flat and so on. Boy, he's meandering around, but here we go. Let's see. So I'm going to play 3-5 on the tritone. Whoops. I'm going to go 3-2-1, 3-1, 3-2-1. Group of 2, and a group of 3. Good to see an old friend here. This only happens once, this bizarre one. It's looking for A. And as is usual, as we've seen before, well, you gotta sneak by an A there. There's A here. So we get tantalizingly close to A. After 2 measures of meandering. Let's see. Okay, there's several choices I'm struggling with. None in the sense that I feel horrible or anything. But I could go anyway. So I can go B flat chord to D flat, all in one hand position. 1, 2, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or I could be more orthodox about my turns and try to turn after black notes onto white notes, and that would be. And then I would stick with something similar. So, in other words, 1, 3, 1, 3, and then do the rest. I really like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 5. And then 2, 4, 3. 240, 142. 241 is where it falls nicely. It just tilts one way and then the other. So I always like it when the fingering results in a sort of sensory feedback that says, ah, that fits beautifully. It's pianistic. Needs to not feel as if it's weak or out of sorts or being asked to do things it's not good at. What makes it strong here is that my arm is delivering not only that, but it delivers a strong hand position. I could even easily reinforce it and teach myself that gesture by playing an octave. Say 1, 2, 1, 3 here. So the reason I'm torn is because this is conceptually simpler, but executionally minutely a little bit harder. 1, 2, 1, 3 involves 2 hand groups instead of 1 hand group, and each one of them is powerful. So I think, for now, that's what I'm doing. sostenuto. That would work. Oh. Oh, I'm always interested. This is like a serendipitous. I don't necessarily know that I will do it, but boy, it's intriguing. But it's possible. It would be very easy to play. For me to play the left hand, it would play the whole chord, and the right hand would dance around. And then I would take over either just for the top note or for a few more notes. Never keep your mind closed to those possibilities, because sometimes they just land in your lap and they make everything remarkably different. For now, I'll stick with maybe a fancy prelude. Right hand has to participate. It also is meandering around, lost, looking for A. E major, simple. Sixths. Two white sixths, two black sixths. It's interesting because this is a major sixth, this is a minor sixth, but it's the feel that's far more significant. Whites, blacks. Well, I have the same kind of issue I had in the right hand before. Do I go to a fifth finger? Keep it simple. Or do I turn? I can go 1, 2, 1, 3. Which for now, because it appeals to my sense of symmetry, I'm going to toss my hand to 1 and 3 and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And then toss to the A. And the E major up line, I'm going to play 1, 2, 3 because it sets up my hand for what's next. 1, 5, 1, 4, down the octave. Mezzo piano. This was, well, the melodic line was forte, and these arpeggios are all mezzo. So there we go. Let's see how it works together. Now, the problem with that kind of practicing, I got all the notes right, I think, but it felt like notes. In other words, I had to play slowly enough to just be able to find out what the notes were and to play them, but there was no sense of connection. So this time what I want to do is find what primary voice, left or right, I can take advantage of that will give me a sense of its physical identity for 3 or 4 notes. I mean, for example, if I have an E major outline in the right hand, I can say E major outline. In the meantime, my left hand may shift between 2 different groups. So my right hand, I tell it, do what you know how to do. It feels good and comfortable and self-reliant. The left hand needs my thought, my concentration. So that's where I put it. So the net result is there's immediate fluency in that 4-note group because I've determined where my attention needs to go. It's one of the most important things to do in practicing is to not waste time spraying distractions all over the place or letting the distractions lose you a sense of simplicity and focus. So, how about that? Now, this time, if I get my left hand placed well, it's a simple 4-note scale. So, working. And part of what, it's not necessarily so, but part of right now what shows me where my attention is where my eyes are looking. In other words, I'm spending most of my time looking at the left hand. What I did with the right hand, obviously I wasn't looking, I was looking at you. So, it's way too fast, which is good, because I want to know when I don't have time to think that it'll still work. Oops. So if I want a little reinforcement, now I'm at the point, well, maybe it was a little too soon. I was trying to look at my hands alone at the keyboard. There we go. Input here. Again, that's the one reason 1, 2, 4, 5 would have been so good, and it still could be. I don't need to replace the hand on the keys. And I still don't want to play the A in its proper place. I want to play it up here. But he didn't write it up there. That's what happens. My students do it, I do it. You get this false bravado. You say, oh, it's working, it's working. Then you push it beyond where you can think about it and maintain full ownership. Let's see how it's sticking. Think left. Think right. There was just enough coming at me that hooking it together horizontally is just as challenging as putting together things vertically. So you have to be careful that you... Okay, one wrong note, but otherwise nice. I have to let go of the keyboard. I know full well I have to reapproach the keyboard to get that. Okay, so I know two things. One is I've got a good solution cooking. Two is it needs reinforcement. So I am going to go on because my time is running out. Okay, that's nice. It's the third time. That exact figure in the right hand. Now, in the left hand. Meanwhile, the right hand gets to do double duty. Finally, depending on your nomenclature, this is the B theme or the C theme. Unlike, oh no, I take it back. This also is in augmentation, but because of the stagger, it gets extra rhythmic vitality, so it's one. extra physical demands placed on it. I know there's one more note hidden in there. Okay, so so he's modulating a bit to keep things exciting. Doesn't want too much A minor, so let's see. Now I have not yet made final decisions about pedaling. If I try to make this all hold with the regular damper pedal, there's an awful lot of stuff holding together. Now this is getting complicated. I may stop here because it's sufficiently challenging that I want all my wits about me and I want to consolidate what I've done. But I am curious to know what is being demanded of me here. Pedal-wise, well, it's written mezzo piano, so that helps. Suckered by the left-hand figuration. The alternation means it's a constant flow of eighth notes, even though it's not spelled that way or written out. It's not as complicated as it's notated, and that's often an important issue early on, that if you let the visual complexity turn into a complex learning, then you're stuck. If you can find the simplicity early on, then you're freed from the fetters of the score. So I think that's what's going to happen here. I'm going to have fun here. Sharp, which I'm either going, let's try either playing with probably with a 3-5, and either I'm going to go to 1-2 and toss my hand, or 2-1. I much prefer 2-1 because for my hand, it's just that I have to hang on to these A's in funny places. It. So it's going to be 2-1, lift, yeah. Okay, so there is significantly more stuff that Prokofiev has provided than what he provided before. In other words, there's a lot of new figuration. My initial thoughts are when it goes white-black, go 2-1. When it goes white-white, do something else. just like A, C sharp. Two whole tones or major third, but not written that way. I guess 2-4, reasonable, going to 5. Only slightly bizarre, so slightly bizarre wins. Nice. So I have 2-4, 2-4, 2-4, 1-4, 1-4, 2-4. Okay, that shows me that that's going to be fine. In other words, a moment ago I was just staring at the notes and thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And the next moment what kicked in was a sense of what makes me comfortable. 2-1 from black to white. Even though it's not written as two-note slurs, those two notes are definitely linked together in my thought process. So that will be easy enough. And there's going to be little skips here, and so on, which I'll probably want to know well enough so I can do them looking, just to guarantee their accuracy. Although I can see that this quickie scale up top, oh, it's a scale, not a glissando, so this reminds me a little of Liszt, because somebody has written, maybe Prokofiev, go to 5th finger and then toss your hand. And Liszt sometimes has these 2 octave scales going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so finding it hard to read. I think that's an F. Yep, it's an F. So he goes. Okay. All is well. I'll come back later. Bye-bye.